It sounds like a cliche to say that the Z750 is the Swiss Army knife of cameras, but that's really what it is. If there's a more versatile camera than the Z750, I have no idea what it would be. Of course, the main thing you give up with a 2/3 inch camera as compared to a cinema-style camera is super shallow depth of field. Due to the smaller sensor size of the Z750, it can be challenging to match the look you can get with a cinema-style camera and a fast lens. Obviously, shooting with super shallow depth of field is not what the Z750 and Z450 are designed to do best. And you can either look at that as a handicap, or you can do as I do and embrace it as one of the camera's many advantages. These cameras are intended to be used for shooting situations where extremely shallow cinematic depth of field might actually be a drawback, and when changing lenses frequently is simply not practical. Personally, I find the shallow depth of field look I can get with my Z750 to be perfectly acceptable for just about everything I shoot, including sit-down interviews. I mean, I don't really want my interviews to have backgrounds that are so out of focus they start to look like green screen graphics. In my opinion, it is certainly possible to take the shallow depth of field look too far. And with that said, the difference between the Z750 and a super 35mm camera, such as an f/55 or FS7, may not be as big as you think anyway. For example, a fairly typical interview for me with my Z750 would be the camera located 10 feet from the subject, the focal length zoomed to about 40mm, and the aperture set to f2.0. That combination of settings gives me a depth of field of about 6 inches, which is shallow enough to look nice, yet still allows me to keep the person safely in focus when they inevitably start shifting around during the interview. Now, in order to match that shot with my f/55, while keeping the camera at the same distance from the subject and having the same amount of depth of field, I'd need to shoot the interview with a 95mm lens set to f4.5. On the left, you see the Z750, and on the right, the f/55. Granted, the framing isn't exactly the same and the white balance hasn't been matched very well, but I think the shots are close enough to show that there isn't any meaningful depth of field difference between the two cameras. The Z750 and a normal E&G lens can achieve similar shallow depth of field to a super 35mm camera that has a lens set to f4.5. And I know for a fact there are a lot of people using super 35mm cameras with f4 lenses. Now obviously the f/55 can go even shallower if I were to open up the iris to f2.8 or maybe even f2.0. So I'm certainly not saying that the Z750 can match the look of a cinema-style camera in all instances. There's no question that a super 35mm or full-frame camera with a nice fast lens can provide shallower depth of field if you really want it, and can handle the challenges of keeping the subject in focus when he or she moves. My point with this demonstration is that the difference between a 2/3 inch camera and a super 35mm camera is not as significant as many people assume. The bottom line is that if super shallow depth of field is your #1 priority, and that one factor alone outweighs all the other advantages of an E&G camera, then neither the Z750 nor Z450 is probably going to be the right camera for you. And that's fine. That's exactly why there are so many different cameras for us all to choose from. As you can see, the Z750 and Z450 really are revolutionary cameras, and I've only scratched the surface of their amazing features and capabilities. To help flatten the learning curve for other camera operators, I've published a 400-page in-depth book that covers pretty much everything you need to know in order to get up and running quickly with either of these two cameras. Chapters include scene files, S-log, recording formats, audio, live streaming, and everything in between. With over 35 years of experience in television production, I know what information an operator needs to have, what settings on the camera are going to provide the best results, and just as importantly, I know how to teach others what I have spent months learning. So whether you're an owner or a renter or a freelancer hired to operate a Z750 or Z450, I hope my book will give you the inside edge that you need to become quickly proficient with either of these two cameras. Thanks for watching, and happy shooting.